One big question I constantly think about is what could potentially bring Battlefield 5 down? And this is something that obviously for me as a content creator who enjoys the game and makes content about the game is quite important, but also just as a general fan of the series, what is it that gives each game a problem that potentially could be its final hurdle? And we've seen this a lot in previous Battlefield titles. In Battlefield 4, the bugs at launch made it seem as though the game was coming from a position of no return. It felt like within the first 6 months, Battlefield 4 was very much on the ropes and it had a very difficult period. The same applied to Battlefield 3, there were definitely some massive balancing issues in the game that put a lot of players off. The same applied in Battlefield Hardline, there was just a generic descent towards some of the balancing decisions in that game. And it feels like with every Battlefield, like Battlefield 1's RSP issue, we faced small problems or big problems that have always been the sort of defining moment for that game. What would make that game significantly better? In Battlefield 4 it was repairing all the bugs. In Battlefield 1 it was making sure that RSP was released to the public and that they could enjoy it in its fullest extent. And Battlefield 5 is definitely not alone with this issue, and this is something that I want to talk about today. Now before I start, I think it is worth recognising that Battlefield 5 does have some rather large issues. For example, the lack of RSP at the moment in the game is definitely something I would call a huge hurdling block, especially considering just how many Battlefield communities really take advantage of RSP, and I think it's been one of the cornerstones of this franchise for a long time now. But what I feel will pivotally be the end of Battlefield 5 is something called quality of life, and you've probably heard this in other video games. The biggest comparison I can make is Rainbow Six Siege, and I feel like Battlefield 5 has had a lot to learn from Rainbow Six as a game that initially wasn't received very well. Rainbow Six struggled when the game first came out due to a bunch of issues it had, and the reception of the game in comparison to what people saw in E3 trailers, to what they saw in the actual release of the game graphically speaking and a few other places, definitely caused a lot of upset. So we have two games that were received very badly. But what made Rainbow Six Siege such a success was its focus on quality of life. Rainbow Six suffered from numbers of issues. It had netcode problems, it had hit rate problems, it had issues with lighting, it had issues with game design, it had issues with map design, things that just fundamentally were broken in every sense of the word. And this is exactly what we have in Battlefield 5. The fact that the games are radically different doesn't matter because the cornerstones of the game, such as progression and in-game experience, are fundamentally the same thing. And much like Battlefield 5, Rainbow Six didn't suffer from any major issues bar its netcode when it first released, and RSP is perhaps the only major issue currently in Battlefield 5, dependent on what you think is subjective in that sense. But what it does suffer from is lots of small minor issues and medium issues that are enough to frustrate players and stop them coming back to the game. And when these minor issues become so repetitive and so infuriating, you eventually just put the game down. I never stopped playing Rainbow Six Siege because of one big issue. I stopped playing the game because there were so many small minor issues that kept bothering me over and over again that just became infuriating to even try and play a single match. And I think the same issue is very much prevalent here. So, for starters, we have the company coin issue in Battlefield 5. Players that have worked their asses off to get to the max rank, even though it doesn't necessarily require a lot of time, are clearly heavily engaged with the game more than an average player, and they're no longer being rewarded for their participation, nor can they buy skins or anything else in the game that matters cosmetically because they have been handicapped here. The next thing is issues with time to death. People are constantly being one-framed, and although we know this is something being worked on the January patch, at the moment it's reached a point now where people are so infuriated by seeing it happen to them that it really is enough to stop you playing. It doesn't take, just one or two time-to-death kills, it takes maybe 3 or 4, but just that instance of a one-frame death is enough for one person to go, well, that death really sucked, I'm just going to turn off the game. And we've all done that sometimes, that one frustrating death that's enough for us to quit a server, and once we've quit the server, it tends to be enough to make us debate if we want to carry on playing. And there are other issues as well. For example, sound design in the game is currently pretty poor. I think footsteps in general are something that are incredibly hard to locate, don't seem to make a lot of sense, and I think is something that has been a huge source of frustration in the game. Another issue as well is the clear lack of damage indicators. If you get shot from the front, the damage indicator can show up to the left, to the right, behind you. It's clearly incorrect, it doesn't have any actual use, and it's actually more confusing than it is of benefit at the moment. And that's just a minor bug, but it's enough of a HUD element and enough frustration for you to get shot from the front, look to the left because that's where your damage indicator has said, and then get killed from the front. And it's things like that, the minor issues here and there, that are enough to make a player really stop playing Battlefield 5. And I think this is something that desperately needs looking into. Company coins, time to death / netcode issues, and progression elements like not tracking Tides of War events are just insane. And I think these minor things, as they continue to become more and more of a frustration, are more and more of a reason for the average player to put the game down. Now, recently the developers changed time to kill, and that was recently reverted, but one of the reasons behind this was something that they call player churn, where a player plays the game and then stops playing the game for a long period of time. And I strongly believe that some of the issues mentioned here are exactly why players have stopped playing. Imagine doing a Tides of War challenge to earn a weapon 6 times over and being frustrated because it hasn't tracked the challenge and it hasn't recorded your efforts. Imagine being at the max rank and no longer earning any more company coins to buy skins. You regularly question why it is you're playing, and if you have bad experiences in-game, as well as the progression elements that support the game, then you're definitely not going to carry on playing Battlefield 5. And I think this is something that desperately needs looking into. And there are a whole manner of things that definitely need attention. You know, we've mentioned some of the issues already, but there definitely are other things too, like for example the lack of lighting in the game that makes it difficult to see players. There's definitely an issue with character lighting in Battlefield 5 and player visibility in general that makes it incredibly frustrating. There definitely still are some balancing problems. The medic class in particular feels incredibly underwhelming. I know some people like to argue that the medic class has the ability to revive and use bandages, so should have weaker weapons, but you know, the support class has ammo, the assault class can blow up vehicles, and the medic class and recon classes have the abilities that they have too, and that shouldn't necessarily entail that anybody's guns should be weaker or more powerful. And balancing issues in general are just the surface. You know, we have a whole plethora of mini issues, and I'm sure you guys in the comment section below can name some problems that you find frustrating in Battlefield 5, and I can guarantee you probably have at the bare minimum 2 or 3. And if you think about it, some of these issues may become repetitive enough to stop you playing, and although it hasn't hit me just yet, I'm sure somewhere down the line it'll be frustrating for me too, should we not see any progress soon in the January patch. So troops, that's about it for this video today. What do you think could be the downfall of Battlefield 5? And for me it is quality of life, but are there any other serious issues that you see that come into the future of this game? Let me know in the comment section below. As always troops, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again soon in another video.